Hello students, hope all of you are doing well and be safe at home. Welcome back to your chemistry class. Today we are going to start chapter 3, that is water. All of you know that water is very important in our life. Without food we can live for few weeks, but without water we can't live for few days. So water plays a very important role in our life and water has unique properties. So in this chapter we are going to study the property of water, the composition of water and the impurities of water and how to remove these impurity and make the water useful for drinking. So all these processes we study in this chapter. So let's do it one by one. The next topic is formula of water. What is the formula of water? All of you know very well, H2O. And the chemical name of water is dihydrogen oxide. So it is very important that water is the common name and the chemical name of water is dihydrogen oxide because there is 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen. And the molecular mass of water is, we know that atomic mass of hydrogen is 1. So 1 multiplied by 2 plus atomic mass of oxygen is 16. So 16 multiplied by 1 because there is 1 atom of oxygen. So it is multiplied by 1. And what we get? 18 AMU, atomic mass unit. So the molecular mass of the water is 18 AMU. AMU is the unit to measure molecular mass. I have already told you earlier. So the molecular mass is 18 AMU. Then we come to the structure of water. So there is 1 oxygen atom and 2 hydrogen atom. They are covalently bonded with oxygen. So there is a covalent bond between hydrogen and oxygen. All of you know that what is covalent bond? Covalent bond formed by the sharing of an electron. And elements share electrons to complete their octet. So here there is a covalent bond between oxygen and hydrogen. Here is the electron dot structure of water. So by this structure you can understand that in the outermost orbital oxygen has 6 electron. You can see in the diagram 2 to 4 and to 6. So in the outermost orbital oxygen has 6 electron and hydrogen has only 1 electron. So they share the electrons to complete the octet. So here you can see hydrogen share 1 electron. So there are 2 hydrogen atoms. So both of the atoms share 1 electron. So oxygen able to complete its octet, as well hydrogen will also complete its octet because now hydrogen have 2 electrons. So hydrogen also complete the octet and oxygen will also complete the octet. So there is a covalent bond between hydrogen and oxygen. So this is the formula, molecular mass and structure of water. The next topic is how important water in our life. So there is 70% of earth area occupied by water and there is only 2.5% of fresh water. So water exists in all the 3 states, solid, liquid and gas. Solid, it is the form of ice, liquid, it is the form of water and gas, it is the form of water vapor. So water exists in all the 3 states, solid, liquid and gases, and it occurs in both free state as well as combined state. So there is a diagram of water cycle. All of you have studied water cycle in your previous classes. So there is a process of evaporation. What is evaporation? Evaporation is the conversion of liquid state into vapor. When water convert liquid to vapor, it's called evaporation. And transpiration, movement of water through plants and its part like stem, leaves, etc. So water, here you can see here is the ocean. So water convert into the vapor and go up and make cloud. Similarly, transpiration, water come from transpiration, go up and make cloud, and in the form of rain water come back on the earth surface. So this is the water cycle. Then the next topic, how water is important for everything. So water is a major constituent of all the living things, plant, animal and human beings. and water makes 70% of our body weight. Water occurs in both free and combined state, and water has a property to dissolve a wide range of substances. So water is considered as a universal solvent. This is very important point, that water has ability to dissolve a wide range of substances. That's why we called water a universal solvent. The ability to water to form solution is responsible for all the life processes. So water has unique properties. Water purify for drinking purpose. We know water we get is not good for drinking. So when we want to make water useful for drinking, we should remove the impurities. So water is purified by the method of filtration, distillation, and bacterial impurities removed by chlorine. So when we add chlorine in the water, water can be purified. So these all are the method to purify the water. The next topic is physical properties of water. So here we see what are the physical properties of water. First is nature. Pure water is a clear, transparent, colorless, odorless and tasteless. So here one point is very important, that pure water is tasteless. But if we take water with impurities, so it will have some taste because of impurities. So pure water is tasteless. Then the boiling point. We know the boiling point of the water is 100 degrees centigrade and 760 mmHg. And pressure affect boiling point. There is a direct relationship between pressure and boiling point. If we increase the pressure, boiling point will also increase. And if we decrease the pressure, boiling point will decrease. So there is a direct relationship between boiling point and pressure. Now we come to the next physical property, freezing point. We know the freezing point of water is 0 degree centigrade under normal pressure, and the freezing point of water decreases with increase in pressure. So it is very important point that there is a reciprocal relationship between pressure and freezing point. If we increase the pressure, the freezing point will be decreased. So the important point is here that there is a reciprocal relationship between freezing point and pressure, and there is direct relationship between boiling point and pressure. So this point is important. Then we come to the next property, density. At 4 degrees centigrade, water has its maximum density. So it's very important that at 4 degrees centigrade, water has its maximum density. It's very important point, and water has unique nature, because at 4 degrees centigrade it shows maximum density. We were talking about the property density. So when we are going to freeze water, water expands in volume. That's why ice is less dense with water, because when we freeze water, when water convert into the ice, the volume will expand. So there is a less density of ice comparatively to the water. That's the reason ice floats on water. Now we come to the anomalous expansion of water. Water has an unusual physical property. When it cools, it first contracts in volume, then like other liquid, but below 4 degrees centigrade it start expanding and continue till the temperature reaches at 0 degrees centigrade. So when we cool the water, it contracts in the volume, but below 4 degrees centigrade it again expands till it reaches the 0 degree centigrade, which is the freezing point of water. So it is the unique nature of the water or unique property of the water. Because of this property, marine life exists in water, because you can see in this diagram, the top of the pond there is ice, but below ice water is present in the liquid state. So marine life can exist because of this property, and there is a graph between density and the volume. So you can understand this by the graph and this picture. Now we come to the next point, latent heat of fusion of ice. So what is the latent heat of fusion? The latent heat of fusion is the amount of heat required to change a substance from solid state to liquid state at its melting point without changing the temperature. So I repeat it again. The latent heat of fusion is the amount of heat required to change a substance from solid state to liquid state at its melting point without changing the temperature. So there are two important points. First, the temperature is constant and at its melting point. So these two important points are here. And the latent heat of fusion, it has a specific value of 336 joule per gram or 80 calorie per gram. The same amount of heat is released when 1 gram of water solidified to form 1 gram of ice at 0 degree centigrade. So there is a high specific latent heat of solidification. So what is the latent heat of solidification? Amount of heat required to change a substance from liquid to solid without changing the temperature. So it is the latent heat of solidification. And because of high latent heat of solidification, lakes and rivers do not freeze suddenly. Then the next topic is latent heat of vaporization of water. So what is vaporization? When water is boiled, it changes into the gaseous state. When liquid changes into the gaseous state, we call it vaporization. So the energy required to change water into vapor at its boiling point without any change in the temperature is called latent heat of vaporization. I repeat it again. The energy required to change water into vapor at its boiling point without changing temperature. So same here, 2 points are here, that the temperature is constant and it occur at the boiling point, and the specific value is 2268 joule per gram or 540 calorie per gram. So when we are sweating during the summer season, so there is a process of evaporation. All of you have studied this in your previous classes, that when we sweating, so there is a process of evaporation. Evaporation take heat from the body and giving us a cooling effect. That's why after sweating we feel cool. And there is a specific heat capacity. So first we come to know that what is the specific heat capacity. When 1 gram of water heated at 1 degree centigrade, listen carefully, when 1 gram of water heated at 1 degree centigrade, it absorbs 4.2 joule or 1 calorie of heat energy. So it is the specific heat capacity of water. Because of this, we use water in the motor car radiator, desert coolers, etc. And due to this specific high heat capacity, the presence of large amount of water is able to modify the climate nearby land areas, making them warmer in winter and cooler in summer. So this is all done because of the specific heat capacity of water. Now we come to the topic water as a universal solvent. I told you earlier that water is a universal solvent because water has a capacity to dissolve a wide range of substances. So we call it universal solvent, and it dissolves solid as well as liquid and gases. So water is considered as a universal solvent. Water has a dielectric constant. So water has a high dielectric constant. What is the dielectric constant? It is the measurement of polarity. If there is greater polarity, there will be high dielectric constant. So water has a high dielectric constant because the electrostatic force of attraction is very less between the positive and negative ions of water. So electrostatic force is the force which work between the positive and negative ions. So water has very less electrostatic force, that's why it has high dielectric constants. And water can soluble every substance in it. Even some substances are insoluble in water, but we find that they can dissolve in small traces. For this, we can do an experiment. Take water on a glass vessel. So, extremely small amount of glass vessel, extremely small amount of glass dissolve in it. When we take water in a glass vessel, so even a small amount of glass dissolve in it. And this reason we call it water a universal solvent. Or we can do an experiment. So to show that ordinary tap water contains dissolved solid. So what is the procedure? Put some tap water on a clean watch glass and place it over a beaker containing water as shown in the figure. I will show you the figure later. The water in the beaker, when all the water has evaporated from the watch glass, remove it from the burner and let it cool. So water can dissolve even inorganic compounds which are usually electrovalent. So water can dissolve inorganic compound as well. You can see in the figure, that is tap water on the watch glass. And observation, what will we observe? On looking at the watch glass against light, a number of concentric rings of solid matter are seen. So this is the rings of concentric rings of solid matter. These are dissolved solid left behind evaporation of water. So these are the solid which is left behind the evaporation of water. So importance of dissolved salt in water. What is the importance? The dissolved solid in water are salts, minerals and impurities. Salt and minerals are essential for growth and development of plant. They add taste to the water. As earlier I told you that the pure water is tasteless. If we take water and we feel the taste, so it is because of the impurities which are present in the water. They supply the essential minerals needed by our bodies. The next topic is air dissolved in water. So all of you know that in the natural sources like lakes, rivers, ponds, air dissolved in water. So there are two components which are dissolved in water, nitrogen and oxygen. So oxygen is more soluble than nitrogen. We know that oxygen is very necessary for marine life like fish because they use the dissolved oxygen for respiration. So 1 liter of water contain 40 centimeter cube of dissolved oxygen, and carbon dioxide is also dissolved in the water. So aquatic plants use dissolved carbon dioxide for photosynthesis or to prepare their food. Carbon dioxide dissolved in water react with limestone to form calcium bicarbonate. Here you can see this is the reaction of photosynthesis. You know very well, 6CO2 plus 12H2O in the presence of chlorophyll, sunlight, glucose will form C6H12O6. And another reaction is that when dissolved carbon dioxide react with limestone. So what is limestone? Limestone is calcium carbonate. The common name of calcium carbonate is limestone. So remember this is very important. Calcium carbonate react with carbon dioxide and water and they will form calcium bicarbonate, CaHCO3 whole twice. So this is the reaction which is going to be happen, and we know that air dissolve in water and air can react with the substances, or air can react with limestone. So they will make sodium bicarbonate. So this is all the reactions. Then we come to the next topic, solution as mixture or substances in water. So what is solution? Solution is a homogeneous mixture of two or more components. So first we come to know that what is homogeneous mixture. Homogeneous mixture has a uniform composition throughout the solution. It has a uniform composition. So solution is a homogeneous mixture of two or more components. So there are two components in solution, solute and solvent. So what is solute? The substance that dissolve in solvent is solute, and solvent in which the substance is going to be dissolved, we call it solvent. So there is one important point is here, that solute always present in less quantity and solvent is always present in high quantity. So we can identify solute and solvent according to their quantities. The substance which is present in less quantity will be solute, and the substance which is present in high quantity will be solvent. So this is also another definition of solute and solvent. There are many kind of solutions like binary, ternary and quaternary. So if there is two components in solution, we call it binary solution. And if there is 3 component in solution, we call ternary, and if there is 4 component in solution, we call it quaternary solutions. So in this class you have to study only binary solutions, means there are only 2 components, solute and solvent. So let's see the different type of solutions. Like if the 2 substances are present in the same phase, means same state, the component that is excess is termed as solvent and the component which is less is termed as solute. I have told you earlier, a solution may be formed by mixing a liquid with another liquid like water and alcohol. A solid with a liquid, sugar solution, because sugar is a solid and water is liquid. A liquid with gas, soda water. A solid with another solid, alloys. Alloys are homogeneous mixture. A homogeneous solution of a solid into another solid is called a solid solution, and common metal alloys are solid solutions. The gold used in making jewelry is a solid solution containing gold and small quantities of copper or silver. So in gold there is a small quantity of copper and silver, and in brass is a solid solution containing 70% of copper and 30% of zinc. So brass is an alloy which is a mixture of copper and zinc. So there is 70% of copper and 30% of zinc. A solution in which the size of the solute particles is about 10 m is called a true solution. In a true solution, the solute particles and the solvent molecules cannot be distinguished even under a microscope. So what is true solution? So there are some characteristics of true solution. That first is, true solution is a homogeneous mixture and the solute particles are too small in size. We can't distinguish solute particles even under a microscope. They are too small in the size. So we call it true solution, in which we can't distinguish the solute and the solvent because solute particle is very less in size. So this is the true solution. Then the next topic is characteristic of a true solution. So first, it is homogeneous mixture. As I have told you earlier, the solute particle are very small. We can't distinguish solute particle even under the microscope. So the solute particles are very small. It is clear and transparent. The solution is transparent. It does not scatter light. Its component cannot be separated by filtration. Solute and solvent are mixed thoroughly. Even we can't separate it by filtration. The solute particles in a solution do not settle down. So these are the important characteristics of a true solution. The next topic is saturated solution. So what is saturated solution? A solution that cannot dissolve any more of the solute at given temperature is called saturated solution. So there is important point, temperature. A solution that cannot dissolve any more of the solute at given temperature is called saturated solution. So preparation of saturated solution. By this experiment you can understand how do we prepare a saturated solution. Take 100 gram of distilled water in a beaker, add 1 gram of niter and stir with a glass rod till the niter dissolve. Add 1 gram more of niter and stir it. It too will dissolve. Continue adding a gram of niter at a time and stir. After each addition, a stage will come when no more of niter will dissolve at that temperature, no matter how long it is left there or how it is stirred. The solution is then said to be saturated with niter at that temperature. So in this procedure you can understand how can we make the saturated solution. If we add solute in the solution, it will dissolve, and we add some more solute, and then one stage will come, then when we add solute it will not dissolve, so it will become saturated solution. So at given temperature is very important here. So what is the effect of cooling a saturated solution? If we decrease the temperature or if there is fall in temperature, so the solubility will also decrease. This is very important point, that if we fall the temperature, the solubility will decrease. and if we increase the temperature, the solubility will increase. You can understand it by doing an experiment. In your home, you can do an experiment. You take water, you try to dissolve the sugar. Put some sugar and stir the solution. After some time, put some more sugar and stir the solution. So after some time, one stage will come that you add the sugar, but it will not dissolve. So the solution becomes saturated. But when you heat the solution, so you see you can dissolve more sugar, or the sugar which is settled down in the water, if you heat the water, that sugar will be dissolved. So when we increase the temperature, solubility will increase. When we decrease the temperature, solubility will decrease. And there is one important point: if you left solution in higher temperature for a long time, so solvent slowly vaporizes and you will get a crystals of the solid. So this is a property of the solution. The next topic is effect of heating a saturated solution. When we heat saturated solution, what will happen? So I explained you earlier that when we heat a saturated solution, it will become unsaturated. We can add more solute in this. If a saturated solution is heated to a higher temperature, then it becomes unsaturated. More solute can be dissolved in this solution now. Insaturated solution can also be made unsaturated by adding more solvent to it. So if we heat saturated solution, so it will become unsaturated because we can add more quantity of solute in it. So what is the unsaturated solution? A solution in which more of the solute can be dissolved at a given temperature is known as unsaturated. So a solution in which more of the solute can be dissolved at a given temperature is known as unsaturated solution. And what is supersaturated solution? A solution that holds more solute than it can theoretically do at a given temperature is a supersaturated solution. So a solution that holds more solute, it called as supersaturated solution. So what is the effect of heat? Heat a saturated solution and dissolve some more solute. So basically what is the effect of heat? Heat will increase the solubility. When we increase the heat, solubility will increase, or when we decrease the heat, solubility will decrease. So this is a relationship between heat and saturated solution or solubility of the solution. Now the next topic is solubility. What is solubility? The amount of solute that dissolve in 100 gram of solvent to form a saturated solution at a particular temperature is called its solubility. So this is the definition of solubility. I repeat it again. The amount of solute that dissolve in 100 gram of solvent to form a saturated solution at a particular temperature is called its solubility. Different substances dissolve to different extents in same volume of a given solvent. Means if we have 100 gram of solvent, so different substance going to be dissolved in different manner. They have the different solubilities. For example, the masses of sodium chloride and potassium nitrate that dissolve in 100 gram of water at 40 degree centigrade are 36.5 gram and 63 gram respectively. So we can see that potassium nitrate is more soluble than sodium chloride. So this is the solubility of potassium nitrate. It is more soluble than sodium chloride because 63 gram will dissolve. So the solubility of potassium nitrate is greater than that of the sodium chloride. We can understand by the help of this example. A substance that has negligible solubility is called insoluble. The substance which has negligible solubility, we called it insoluble. Example, silver chloride, which has 0.0015 gram at its solubility. This is negligible amount. So we call this silver chloride is insoluble in water. On the other hand, a substance that has more than negligible but less than high solubility is called sparingly soluble. A substance which has more than negligible but less than high solubility, we call it sparingly soluble. means slightly soluble. Example, calcium hydroxide, which has 17 gram acid solubility. A substance having high solubility such as sodium chloride is simply called soluble. So a substance which has negligible solubility, we call it insoluble. A substance which has more than negligible but less than high solubility, we call it sparingly soluble. And a substance which have high solubility, we called it soluble. The next topic is factors affecting solubility. Now we see the factors. What factors affecting solubility? So the rate of dissolution or rate of solubility of a solid is depend upon the following factor. There are certain factors which affect solubility. First, size of solute particles. The smaller the size of solute particle, the greater its total surface area exposed to the solvent and the greater the solubility. So first factor is size of the solute particle. If the size of the solute particle is small, so greater the solubility. Then string. This brings more of the solvent in contact with the solute and thus increase the rate of solubility. So what is the effect of string? This brings more contact of solute and solvent and increase the solubility. Then temperature. We know when we increase the temperature, solubility will also increase. For example, the solubility of potassium nitrate in water is 20 degrees centigrade is 31 to 6 gram, and whereas solubility at 60 degrees centigrade is 108 grams. So you can see in this example, when we increase the temperature, the solubility will also increase. So these are the factors which affect the solubility. Then the next topic is effect of pressure and temperature on solubility of gases in water. So what is the effect of pressure and temperature on the solubility of gases? Pressure. An increase in pressure of the surface of water increase the solubility of a gas. So when we increase the temperature, the solubility of gas will also increase. At given temperature, the mass of gas dissolved by a fixed volume of liquid is directly proportional to the pressure on the surface of the liquid. This is the Henry's law. So Henry given this law that at given temperature, the mass of gas dissolved by a fixed volume of liquid is directly proportional to the pressure on the surface of the liquid. You can understand it by the example. Like the solubility of carbon dioxide is water under normal atmospheric pressure is low. But when the water surface is subjected to high pressure, more of carbon dioxide gas dissolve. When we apply pressure on the water, its surface area will increase and the solubility will also increase. So as is seen in the case of soda water, on opening the soda water bottle, the dissolved gas rapidly bubbles out. So when we open the bottle of the soda water, the dissolved gases rapidly comes out, since pressure of the surface of water suddenly decreases. Why? Because the pressure of the water decreases, so the gas is coming out easily. Temperature. An increase in the temperature of water causes decrease in solubility of gas. So it is a very important point that when we increase the temperature of water, decrease the solubility of gas. Means there is a reciprocal relationship between temperature and solubility. When we increase the temperature of water, so decrease in the solubility. Thus on boiling water loses its taste, since some taste of water is due to the gases in it. So on boiling, these gases escape from water and leaving it tasteless. So this is the effect of pressure and temperature on the solubility of gas. The next topic is crystal and crystallization. So what is crystal? A crystal is a homogeneous solid of definite geometrical shape. It has symmetrically arranged smooth plane surface which meet forming the sharp edges. And what is the crystallization? When we cool a hot saturated solution, so crystals are obtained, and this process is known as crystallization. A crystal of the pure compound always similar in shape. but those of different compounds may be different. In nature, several crystals are formed, some of which are recovered from the earth as minerals, common salt and potassium nitrate. So, in some cases, the beautiful colors are due to traces of water or impurities present in them. So, for example, the red color of the ruby is due to a trace of a mercury oxide present in its crystal. So, you can see the ruby has a red color. So, red color is due to the trace of mercury oxide present in its crystal. In laboratory, crystal may be obtained by the following method. By cooling a hot saturated solution. So, in laboratory, we can obtain crystal from the following methods. By cooling a hot saturated solution, by slowly evaporating a saturated solution, by cooling a fused mass, or by sublimation. So these all are the procedure. By this we can obtain crystal in the laboratory. The next topic is hydrated and anhydrous substances. So what is hydrated and anhydrous substance? Which substance which contain water molecule along with salt like sodium carbonate, decahydrate, Na2CO3.10H2O. Because there is 10 molecules of water attached to it, so it is called sodium carbonate decahydrate, and copper sulfate pentahydrate because 5 molecules of water attached to copper sulfate. So this is copper sulfate pentahydrate are hydrated substances. Because the substance which contain water, we call it hydrated substance. The substances which cannot have water or which don't have water, we call it anhydrous substances. Substances which do not contain any water along with the salt. So there are the basic difference between hydrated. By the name you can understand substance which contain water molecule along with salt, and substance which do not contain any water along with salt, we call it anhydrous substances. For example, sodium chloride, potassium nitrate, KNO3. Then we come to the hydrated substances. The crystal of some salt contain water of crystallization. This water give the crystal their shape. In some cases it also give them color. Such salt are known as hydrated salt. So what are hydrated salt? Some salt contain water and these water molecule give shape to them, and also these water molecule give color to them. So such substances are called hydrated substances or hydrated salts. The next topic is water of crystallization. Some solid while crystallizing out from their solution combine with a definite quantity of water known as water of crystallization or water of hydration. A fixed amount of water that is associated with some compound which is an integral part of their crystalline structure is called water of crystallization. So the fixed amount of water which is associated with some compound which is an integral part of their crystalline structure is called water of crystallization. The water of crystallization is in loose chemical combination and can be driven off by heating. So when we want to remove water of crystallization, we can remove it by heating. Produced are condensed and the liquid form is tested. This liquid gives taste to the water. In this process, the crystal lose their water and become anhydrous. All the water combined in the crystalline material is removed. Experiment to show that hydrated copper sulfate crystal blue contain water of crystallization. So here is an experiment. With the help of this experiment you can understand. So what is the procedure? Take some powdered copper sulfate crystal in a clean dry test tube and clamp it in a tightened position so that the condensed water does not trickle or flow back. Gently heat the crystal. When we heat the crystal, the water of crystallization will remove. Observation: drop of colorless liquid condense on the cooler part of the test tube, leaving behind a residue that is anhydrous and amorphous. Amorphous means non-crystalline with no definite shape of structure. So if we want to remove the water of crystallization from substance, we heat the substance, then water of crystallization will remove and they will become anhydrous. So here is the reaction, how hydrated copper sulfate convert into the anhydrous copper sulfate. So we heat the hydrated copper sulfate, which is blue in color. When we heat it, it will convert into the anhydrous copper sulfate and the water molecule will be removed, or water of crystallization will be removed. So here are some salts that containing water of crystallization, like washing soda. I have already told you earlier. What is the chemical name of washing soda? Sodium carbonate decahydrate, because the chemical name of washing soda is sodium carbonate and there is 10 molecules of water attached to it. So it has the name sodium carbonate decahydrate and its color is white. Epsom salt, magnesium sulfate heptahydrate, there is a 7 molecule of water. Then potash alum, hydrated potassium aluminium sulfate. So there is the list of salt which containing water of crystallization. So this table is given in your book, go through it and learn the chemical name and formulas, because it is very important and it will be useful in the senior classes. So learn the chemical name and also the formulas, how many water molecule are attached to it and what is the chemical name. So just go through it and learn all the salts name and their formulas. Then the next topic is determination of water of crystallization. How can we find out the water of crystallization? Take a known weight of crystal of a hydrated salt in a china dish and heat it above 100 degrees centigrade. When the weight of the residue become constant, stop heating. So how can we determine the water of crystallization? We take weight of crystal of a hydrated salt in a china dish and heat it above 100 degrees centigrade. When the weight of the residue become constant, we stop heating and wait the dried substance. So the substance will be dry and water of crystallization is removed. So we can determine the water of crystallization. For example, weight of crystal at room temperature is a gram and weight of residue after heating at 101 degree centigrade, because we heat above 100. So the weight of residue after heating at 101 degree centigrade is b gram. So weight of water a minus b gram, and percentage of water of crystallization a minus b upon a into 100. So this is the formula. With the help of this formula we can find out the water of crystallization or the percentage of water of crystallization. So we put the values in this formula and we can find out the percent of water of crystallization. Then the next topic is anhydrous substances. I told you earlier, the substance which don't have water and any salt, we call it anhydrous substances. So a substance is anhydrous if it contains no water or salt. For example, salts lacking in their water of crystallization. The term anhydrous. Anhydrous can also refer to the gaseous form of some concentrated solution such as ammonia to distinguish it from its aqueous solution. So we can also use anhydrous to the gaseous form of some concentrated solution like ammonia to distinguish it from its aqueous solution. Anhydrous substances are used to perform certain chemical reaction that cannot proceed in presence of water. So there are some reaction which cannot be proceed in the presence of water. So anhydrous substance are used to perform this kind of reaction. Example, table salt is anhydrous sodium chloride. What is table salt which we use in our daily life? It is anhydrous sodium chloride. So gaseous HCl is anhydrous. Anhydrous salt can be obtained from hydrated salt by carefully removing the water of crystallization from it. When we remove the water of crystallization from hydrated salt, we can get anhydrous salt. By heating, as we have studied in the previous slide, that by heating we can remove the water of crystallization. So heating under vacuum or heating in dry and hot air by using dehydrating desiccating agent such as warm concentrated sulfuric acid, we can remove the water of crystallization. So now we come to the next topic, that is efflorescence. What is efflorescence? A phenomenon where a compound loses its water of crystallization on exposure to dry air is called efflorescence. So in simple words we can say, when compound loses its water of crystallization, this process is known as efflorescence. So by this process the substances loses the crystalline shape and they convert into the powder. So efflorescence occur when vapor pressure in the hydrated crystal exceed atmospheric vapor pressure. So there is a condition when vapor pressure in the hydrated crystal exceed from atmospheric pressure, so the phenomenon of efflorescence occur, and it is minimized during humid condition. If there are humid conditions, so it will be minimized. Then we come to the example of efflorescent substances. What are they? First example is washing soda. What is washing soda? It is hydrated sodium carbonate. 10 molecules of water attached to sodium carbonate, and the formula is Na2CO3.10H2O, means 10 water molecule attached to sodium carbonate, and we call it hydrated sodium carbonate. When it is exposed to air, it becomes a monohydrate. Similarly, Glauber salt, it is sodium sulfate decahydrate, Na2SO4.10H2O, 10 water molecule attached to sodium sulfate. When it exposed to air, it become anhydrous sodium sulfate. Then we come to the Epsom salt. It is magnesium sulfate heptahydrate. 7 molecule of water attached to magnesium sulfate. When we exposed it into dry air, it becomes a monohydrates. So this is the process of efflorescence. The next topic is deliquescence. So what is the meaning of deliquescence? Deliquescence is the phenomena in which substances absorb moisture from the atmosphere until they become in solution. So certain water soluble substances, when exposed to the atmosphere at ordinary temperature, absorb moisture from atmospheric air, become moist, lose their crystalline form, and ultimately dissolve in the absorbed water. In simple words, you can understand the deliquescence is the substances when they expose to the atmosphere, they absorb moisture from the atmosphere and ultimately dissolve in the water or until they become a solution. So this phenomena is called deliquescency. Deliquescency occur when vapor pressure inside the crystal is very low compared to the vapor pressure in the atmospheric air. So what are the deliquescent substances? There are the example: caustic soda, NaOH, caustic potash, KOH, magnesium chloride, MgCl2, zinc chloride, ZnCl2. These are the example of deliquescent substances. The next topic is hygroscopy. What is hygroscopy? Certain substances absorb moisture from the atmosphere when they are exposed to it, but not enough to form solution. In deliquescence, we studied that substance absorb moisture from the atmosphere and they will convert into the solution. But in hygroscopy, certain substance absorb moisture from the atmosphere, but they do not convert into the solution. So these substances are called hygroscopic substances, and the phenomena is known as hygroscopy. So what are the example of hygroscopic substances? Concentrated sulfuric acid, phosphorus pentoxide, quicklime. The formula of quicklime is CaO, and silica gel. So these are the example of hygroscopic substances. The next topic is drying and dehydrating agents. So what are drying agents? Drying agents are the substance They absorb moisture from another substance without chemically reacting with them. Means they are not going to react chemically, but they absorb the moisture of the another substance. So we call these agent drying agents, like anhydrous calcium chloride, zinc chloride, phosphorus pentoxide. These all are the drying agents. They are used to absorb moisture or water vapor from the air. So these substances are also called desiccants or desiccating agents. This is very important, that drying agents also called desiccants or desiccating agents. So almost all hygroscopic substances are desiccating agents, like concentrated sulfuric acid, phosphorus pentoxide, quicklime, etc. And what is dehydrating agents? Dehydrating agents are the substance that can remove even the chemically combined water molecule from the substances. So basically dehydrating agents remove water of crystallization from the substances. For example, you can see in this example, copper sulfate pentahydrate, you know the water of crystallization is here. So what is the color of copper sulfate? Blue. So concentrated H2SO4, it is the dehydrating agent we use, and it will remove the water of crystallization from copper sulfate and convert into the copper sulfate, which is white, and water molecule will be removed. So there is a basic difference between drying agent and dehydrating agent. Drying agent do not chemically combine with the substance, but dehydrating agent remove chemically combined water molecule from the substance. If we want to remove water of crystallization from any substance, so we will use dehydrating agents. So dehydrating agents can be remove hydrogen and oxygen in the ratio of 2:1 in the form of water. So there is a cane sugar, we use concentrated H2SO4 dehydrating agent. So there is 12C plus 11H2O. So it will remove the water in the ratio of oxygen and hydrogen. Gases are dried by passing the gases through concentrated sulfuric acid, because concentrated sulfuric acid has a strong affinity for water. So it easily extract water from many substances. So if we want to dry the gases, we always use concentrated sulfuric acid. Passing them through a drying tower or a U-tube containing quicklime. So we can also use quicklime. A drying bulb containing anhydrous calcium chloride. Quicklime, being basic in nature, is suitable for drying ammonia. So when we are going to dry ammonia, we use quicklime because it is basic in nature. Basic gas will not react with a base, because we know ammonia is a basic nature and quicklime is also base. So base will not going to be react with base. So we can use quicklime as a drying agent in ammonia. Liquids are dried by keeping them overnight over anhydrous sodium sulfate. So when we want to drying the liquid, we can use anhydrous sodium sulfate. The next topic is how can we dry the solid. Solid are dried by separating them on a watch glass or a dish and keeping it in a desiccator for some days. So this is the diagram of desiccator. You can see desiccator is an airtight glass vessel with a suitable drying agent, that is anhydrous calcium chloride, placed at the bottom. It is used for drying the solid. So we take the solid on the watch glass and we keep the solid in desiccator for some days, and in the bottom of the desiccator there is anhydrous calcium chloride is a drying agent which is used for drying the solid. So after some days the solid will be dry. So desiccator is used for dry the solids. So there is a difference between drying or desiccating agent or dehydrating agent. So what is the difference between desiccating agent or dehydrating agent? They remove moisture from other substances. They remove chemically combining elements of water in the ratio of 2:1. So desiccating agent remove moisture from substance, but dehydrating agent remove chemically combined water from the substance. They are used to dry gases like chlorine, sulfur dioxide, hydrogen chloride. They are also used in desiccator to keep substance dry. They prepare substance like carbon monoxide, sugar and charcoal. They represent physical change as composition do not change during drying of substance. They represent chemical change. So desiccating agent do the physical change, but dehydrating agent will do the chemically change. They chemically combined with the substance while absorption of the moisture. So this is the basic difference between desiccating agent and dehydrating agent. Then we come to the next topic, soft water and hard water. All of you have heard about it. What is soft water? What is hard water? So water is said to be soft if it is readily forms lather with soap. This is the general concept, that if it is readily form lather with soap, so water is said to be soft. Pure water or water containing sodium salt easily gives lather with soap. Such a water sample is called soft water and is suitable for use. Distilled water and rainwater are example of soft water. So what is the example of soft water? Distilled water and rainwater, because it is readily form lather with soap. Water is said to be hard when it does not readily form lather with soap. So when it is form lather with soap, it is soft water. When it does not readily form lather with soap, it is called hard water. So what are the causes of hardness? Water of some spring, wells and river contain dissolved mineral matter. If this happens to be the hydrogen carbonate, sulfate or chlorides of calcium and magnesium, the water gets hard. So what is the hardness of the water? Hardness of the water is due to the presence of bicarbonate, chlorides or sulfates of calcium and magnesium. So this is very important. Keep it in the mind that hardness of water is due to the presence of bicarbonate, chloride or sulfate. Bicarbonate, chloride or sulfate of calcium and magnesium. So we come to the next concept of soft and hard water. When water flows over beds of limestone and dolomite. So what is limestone? Calcium carbonate. And what is dolomite? That is magnesium carbonate. Carbon dioxide slowly converts some of these into soluble calcium and magnesium bicarbonate, which get mixed with the water and make it hard. So what is the procedure of making hard water? So there is calcium carbonate plus carbon dioxide plus water. So what will make calcium bicarbonate? Then magnesium carbonate, carbon dioxide, water, magnesium bicarbonate. So this is the hardness of the water. How can we make the water hard, or how the water make to be hard? So this is the chemical reaction which is going to be happen. The formation of stalactites and stalagmites in caves is due to the same reason. So what is the stalagmites and stalactites? In some limestone caves, one sometimes sees conical pillar like object, some hanging from the roof of the caves and some rising from the floor. These are formed by water dripping from the cracks in the rock containing dissolved calcium hydrogen carbonate. Release of pressure and warmth inside the caves result in the conversion of some calcium hydrogen carbonate to calcium carbonate. So in this diagram you can see stalactite and stalagmite. See both of them. So these conical pillar which grow downward from the roof is called stalactite. The conical pillars which is downward from the roof, you can see in the picture, this is stalactite. And the conical pillar which grow upward from the floor, there are some conical pillars which are grow upward from the floor, that is called stalagmite. So these are the two important terms. Then we come to the next topic, temporary and permanent hardness. What is temporary hardness and what is permanent hardness? Hardness of water is of two types, temporary hardness and permanent hardness. Water that contain only hydrogen carbonates of calcium and magnesium is called temporary hard water. And it is called temporary hard water because its hardness can be removed just by boiling. So what is the temporary hardness? If water contains only hydrogen carbonate of calcium and magnesium, so it is called the temporary hardness because we can remove this hardness by boiling. So This is the temporary hardness. You can see in the reaction calcium bicarbonate, when we boil calcium carbonate plus water plus carbon dioxide, and magnesium bicarbonate, when we boil magnesium carbonate plus water plus carbon dioxide. So when there is a hydrogen carbonate of calcium and magnesium, we call it temporary hardness. So now we come to the permanent hardness. What is the permanent hardness? Water containing sulfate and chloride of calcium and magnesium is called permanent hard. So when there is only hydrogen carbonate of calcium and magnesium, it is temporary hardness. And when there is sulfate and chloride of magnesium and calcium, so we call it permanent hardness. And this hardness cannot be removed by boiling, so we call this permanent hardness. And the removing of temporary hardness of water by boiling is not a practical method. It's costly and slow. So we cannot remove the temporary hardness by boiling in a large scale because it is not a practical method. So in permanent hardness, we can't remove permanent hardness by boiling, and temporary hardness can be removed by boiling. So permanent hardness is due to the presence of sulfate and chloride of magnesium and calcium. Then we come to the next point, advantages of hard water. What are the advantages of hard water? Hard water containing some dissolved salt has following the advantages. We know that hard water has some dissolved salt. So soft water free from dissolved salt has a very flat taste. As I told you earlier that pure water has no taste, but impure water has a taste. So the presence of salt in the hard water makes it tasty. So it is the advantages of hard water. Hard water is therefore used in the preparation of beverages and wine. Because hard water is tasty, so it is used in the preparation of beverages and wines. Calcium and magnesium salt present in small amount in hard water are essential for the growth of our bones and teeth. We know calcium and magnesium are necessary for the growth of bones and teeth, so it is useful for us if they are present in small amount, but if they are present in greater amount, so it will be harmful. Hard water checks the poisoning of water by lead pipes. When these pipes are used for carrying water, some lead salt dissolve in water to make it poisonous. Calcium sulfate present in hard water form insoluble lead sulfate in the form of a layer inside the lead pipe, and this check the lead poisoning. So this is the very good advantages of hard water. Hard water is used to check the lead poisoning because hard water checks the poisoning of water by lead pipes. Sometimes water flow in the lead pipes. So when these pipes are used for carrying water, if we use lead pipes for carrying water, so some lead salt dissolve in the water. When lead will dissolve in the water, so water will be poisonous because lead is not good. So calcium sulfate present in the hard water forms insoluble lead sulfate. When calcium carbonate react with lead, it will form insoluble lead sulfate in the form of a layer inside the lead pipe. So it will form a layer inside the lead pipe and checks the lead poisoning. So we know that we check the lead poisoning by the help of hard water. So these are the advantages of hard water. Then the next topic is disadvantages of hard water. We know that everything has pros and cons. So we studied the advantages of hard water. Now we are going to study disadvantages of hard water. First, hard water is not suitable for producing steam. Steam is usually made in boilers which are made up of a number of narrow copper tubes surrounded by fire. As the cold water entered these tubes, it immediately changed into the steam, while the dissolved solid incapable of changing into vapor get deposited on the inner wall of the tube. This goes on and thus making the bore of the tubes narrower and narrower. The result is that less water flows through the tube at one time and less steam is produced. So the next point is hard water is also unfit for washing purpose. We know hard water, we can't use hard water for washing purpose because it does not form lather with soap. So it is very difficult to use hard water in washing purpose. So this is the another disadvantages. In washing purpose, soap is invariably used. Soap is chemically a sodium salt of stearic acid and has the formula C17H35COONA. So what is the soap? Soap is a chemically sodium salt of stearic acid. So if the water is hard, the calcium and magnesium ion of the water combine with the negative ions of the soap to form a slimy precipitate of insoluble calcium and magnesium, usually given the name of the soap curd or scum. So it will make soap curd or scum. How it is make the soap curd or scum? Because the calcium and magnesium ion of the water combine with the negative ion of the soap. Soap is the sodium salt of stearic acid. So they will combine the negative ions of the soap to form a slimy precipitate. In this reaction you can see twice NaSt, that means sodium salt of stearic acid, then calcium bicarbonate. So calcium combined with stearic acid and sodium bicarbonate will form. So there is soap curd will form. What is soap curd? Calcium combined with the negative ion of the soap and it will form soap curd. So it is not useful for washing purpose. Then the next topic is cleaning action of soaps and detergent. What is the cleaning action of soaps and detergent? So when a soap or detergent is dissolved in water, the molecule gather as cluster called micelles. In this diagram you can see the molecules are gathered together and make a micelle. Their tails stick inwards and the head outwards. So you can see the tail inwards, all of this tail inwards and head outwards. In cleansing, the hydrocarbon tail attaches itself to the oil and dirt. So the tail is attached to the oil and dirt. When water is stirred, the oil and dirt tend to lift off from the dirty surface and dissociate into fragment. These give an opportunity to other tails to stick to the oil and dirt. So the solution now contains small globules of oil and dirt surrounded by detergent molecule. The negatively charged head present in water prevent the small globules from coming together and form aggregates. Thus the oil and dirt are removed from the cloths when they are rinsed with water. So this is the micelle, you can say. When the molecule gather as a cluster, they will non-micelle. The tail is inward and the head is outward. When we add soap into the add to the cloths, so the tail attached to the dirt and oil. And when we stir the water, what will happen? Oil and dirt lift off from the dirty surface. Oil and dirt lift from the dirty surface and dissociate into the fragments. So in this diagram you can say the hydrocarbon tail which is attached to the oil and dirt. When we put on water or when water is stirred, the oil and dirt lift off from the dirty surface and dissociate in the fragment. So this is the cleansing action of soap and detergents. The next topic is removal of hardness by boiling. How can we remove the hardness by boiling? So carbon dioxide is driven off and the soluble hydrogen carbonate are converted into insoluble carbonates and could be removed by filtration or decanation. So in this reaction you can see calcium bicarbonate, they will convert into calcium carbonate plus water plus carbon dioxide. Calcium carbonate and magnesium carbonate are precipitated, leaving the water soft. So in this reaction calcium or magnesium carbonate will precipitate. You can see in this reaction there is an arrow pointed downwards. That means calcium carbonate precipitate is here. So they are precipitated, leaving the water soft. However, not very practical when large quantities of water need to be softened. So I have told you earlier, it is not a practical method when we have to purify the large quantity of water. So this method can't be used. So by boiling we can remove the hardness, but we can't remove the hardness at large quantities. So this method is not practical. So students, the chapter is completed here. So go through it carefully, and there are so many new terms in this chapter. So try to learn the new terms and formulas which I have given in this chapter. So go through it carefully. Okay, take care. Thank you. Have a nice day.